Now that the bribing portion of the event is over, thank you all for coming. I love this movie, not just because of subject matter, but boy, it's so well done. And for my class, I screened just about every documentary that's ever been made on the subject, and some of them are duds. In fact, there's one on Will that's kind of a dud, and this one was like, but for when you find one that's like a gem like this, it's so great. And what I love about it is that not only is it taking you through Will's life and his journey, but just because of who he was, it's also like a journey through the history of comics. Like, you know, he almost Forrest Gumps all the way through it in a way. No, he does, like, he kind of like finds his place in every single like chapter in the modern history of comics. And by doing so, finds a great place in it. So I don't mean any Forrest Gumpy insult by it, but there's a journey through comics that he takes, even kind of just stepping out when things got insane, and then stepping back in at the most. That's fascinating because it wasn't conscious. It just, you know. So let's. It's almost like he was living and breathing it, like, you know what I mean? Like he was always where he needed to be, like to be the best version of himself, and that's fascinating. I also find we all know a lot of people in this business. That perfect mix of artist and businessman is so rare. We know so many people. In fact, they talk about a little bit on the thing that while he was running his business like an adult. So many of his peers were like, I just want to draw. I don't care. I got to read this contract. I got to hire a lawyer. And to this day, many of our peers, same thing. You're like, how many times do you have to hear this story before you don't become the butt of the joke, you know? So I just find that aspect of him fascinating. I do wish that this documentary would have focused more on his life as an educator. In my mind, it seemed to be a massive chapter of his life that's, you know, covered in the books, I guess. I guess they figured they didn't need to get into it. But to me, that's like a very powerful thing. And when we think about why we're educators, you go, because Will Eisner told us to. Like, and so.
You mean he was teaching at SVA?
Yes, when he's teaching it, and even the process of making the books and why he made the books. I mean, I know some of it's a little obvious because the books needed to exist, but I just, to me, it's so it's like it's like you wouldn't tell Scott McCloud's story without talking about understanding comics at length, you know. So, your feelings while you were watching? I mean, you're in a very unique position because you're literally starting the Spirit like. Today.
Yes, so I was paying.
So you're at
a different kind of attention than almost.
Yeah, you're at a crossroads really of starting, because every time you start a massive project, it really is like a chapter in your own life.
And especially when I'm starting a massive project like this, that is because I've done a lot. You know, I have my own creator-owned stuff, but I've done a lot of what you'd call company-owned or licensed characters. I would say never have I approached one like this that is so attached to one singular vision, one singular voice. And so I'm trying to capture what I liked about Will's stuff, also, you know, put a little of my own thing on the table as well. And that's a difficult balancing act, you know.
Oh, for sure.
I mean,
well, it's also a character because of the nature of just those splash pages. There's, and not to do this to you while you're starting to write it, there's a, here it comes, there's almost a subconscious expectation for someone buying the Spirit that they want to see something that, you know,
yeah, I mean, additionally, you know, I mean, we have not announced the artist for it yet because it's still kind of a.
Is it me?
No, it's you, right?
Well, you've made a huge mistake.
That too, there's such a huge. The bar is so high there, you know, and there's also, you know, as they spoke about in there, there's this neat balancing act in the narrative itself. You know, a lot of the chatter I've read online since we announced the series. Is kind of like, well, you know, the Spirit, you know, better have a light touch, and you know, and certainly some of the Spirit stories are, you know, can go just full on slapstick for the most part, but others of them, and the ones that really spoke to me when I was young, have a real the human pathos is what really speaks to me.
Yeah.
And he expressed that often through moments of humor, but also moments of, I really like the bit where, was it Vonnegut points out that he brought agony, the depiction of agony, which really wasn't in comics at all up until then. And that really struck me. I had not vocalized that to myself.
Well, theatrical emotion at all.
Yes.
You know, first of all, many artists can't produce it. They're just unable to, to this day, a decent smile for an artist to pull off. You see a lot of mainstream comics. There's a lot of, everyone looks like the Joker just poisoned them.
Yes,
That's the best they can do. But a genuine smirk, a loving look, agony, true fear. These are very hard to produce, and his theatrical background, bringing that out in the forefront. Yeah, absolutely. And so,
but the again, these moments of human. I like who mentioned that they first discovered him with the Warren books. Some of you here are old enough to remember these. Some not. In the 70s, Warren Publications published Creepy and Eerie, the big horror titles, and at that point, the comics code was still in effect, and you literally could not produce horror comic books. And that's why the first vampire introduced into commercial comics was Mobius the Living Vampire in Spider-Man, because he wasn't a real vampire, he was a living vampire, and that could get past the comics code. Warren Publications produced these big, oversized black and white horror magazines, and by doing that, they escaped the comics code and could produce horror comics. So as a result, these weren't racked on the spinner racks that all said at the top, "Hey kids, comics." They were up on the magazine shelves with, the men's magazines and the sports magazines, and the result, they always felt a little illicit and dangerous and cool. And I will say the horror ones kind of scared me too much. When I was young to even reach for them. But when I saw the Spirit, I was like, oh, there's a guy in a mask, and he looks like a crusader of some sort. Let me check this out. And so that's where I first experienced those. And in fact, I find as I'm rereading stuff in research for this, I'm having to read it in that form. I can't, because they were produced in black and white with gray tones. When I see it in color, it's like, no.
No, it's like the Turner color movies. Yeah,
yes, exactly,
Absolutely. And Douglas, your thoughts?
It strikes me a couple of amazing things about Eisner, like the fact that during the great period of the Spirit, like from 46 through to 50 or so, it's a different thing every week. Like, not just the tone of the story, but the way he's drawing it, the look and feel of it. It's a totally new thing, and he's doing it every week. He's drawing 7 pages every single week.
And usually with a whole different batch of characters, too. Yep.
Like every time it's a whole new thing, and it's cheaply done. It's on newsprint. I can read them in any format, but a couple times I've been lucky enough to hold actual Spirit sections in my hands. I'm like, this is what this was made for. And it's quick, it's disposable, but it's just this amazing show of like, here's what we got this week, and we're gonna do something totally different next week. Every single week for 5-6 years straight. And then he takes his long interregnum when he's doing PS Magazine, mostly, and the other educational stuff. And then he comes back and he doesn't just do a contract with God, he just keeps on doing stuff. And he does Signal from Space, he does all these things. They were being serialized in the kitchen sink Spirit magazine, like the oversized magazines, which is where I first got to encounter them. Because I was working in a comic store and we'd get like 5 copies of it. And I was like, great.
But those are black and white too.
Yeah. But no, some of them had color.
Oh, did they? Okay.
But the Spirit magazine became Will Eisner's Quarterly, which was literally like whatever Will Eisner feels like doing this quarter. And again, it's a different thing every single time. He's pushing forward constantly, doing stuff that he's never done before. It's absolutely amazing to see.
Well, he's the epitome of an artistic soul, therefore. Never find satisfaction. Just keep, not to claim that I am the epitome of an artistic soul, but you've been to my house. I don't have any of my own artwork on display in my house because I couldn't dwell on that moment anymore. It's once I'm done drawing it, I'm on to the next one. And I would only focus on the shit I didn't like on that drawing. Like, that hand is wrong. And he just exemplified that. I mean, his mind, his soul was creative and reaching out to define the world around him over and over and over again in different fashions.
I really like, we have, and I'm sure they had the back then too, but there's a lot of artists that see themselves as artists, and there's always a pretension that comes with it, and these guys were craftsmen almost first, and you know, Will Eisner seems to wrestle with when he's referred to as an artist. You know, like he looks at you like you're nuts. You know, and there's other guys like this too, not just him, but. And there are guys in our generation that are the same way, that they're getting their work done. You know what I mean? And that's you know, I like that. I like that. I find it very noble where the work is the art. You know what I mean? And
he smiles a lot. You know what I mean? He's enjoying himself.
Yeah.
It's a joy to him to be able to do it.
No, I don't know about you, but just seeing him sit there drawing, I could watch that for like 6 hours. I
could have gone for some more of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like as horrifying it was for me to sit there and draw. Watching him do it is like, you know, that's such a beautiful thing. Susan, so let's talk about the educator's journey here, because he has to be one of the major reasons you've pursued your life's journey.
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that strikes me as I watch the documentary, I'm coming to it as an educator, someone who teaches comics, and also watching it this time as someone who's judging the Eisner Awards this year. That also brings another perspective. But I'm glad that you mentioned his educational role, and I think one of the things that strikes me about him is his steadfast belief in the form. Mm-hmm. Even, you know, when he was with the Eisner-Iger shop, that sweatshop, you know, from the earliest days and then through all of his career, just that steadfast belief that comics can do amazing things and tell all kinds of stories when it wasn't a popular belief. And just that vision from so very early, it just, to me, is so impressive. And I wouldn't be able to do what I do, teach comics and do that, were it not for him. And then, of course, his books about, you know, the graphic storytelling, and he was one of the first people to think about it from that critical, pedagogical perspective. How do we teach comics? Through his work at the School of Visual Art. He was right there teaching comics and then creating these guidebooks and these tools that we can use. So for me, he's such a guiding light as someone who always believed and not only created these masterful things, but also carried it forward and kept mentoring and teaching and bringing in additional generations.
And imagine the pushback he must have received just putting that out there. Mm-hmm. Maybe we should teach this. Teach what? You know? And because here we are, it's $1 billion industry every single month, and we have pushback. So imagine what that pushback must have been like.
When he was
the guy looked at contract he got and didn't think it was worth publishing. Yeah. You know what I mean? So.
And when he was 45 when he got married, his father-in-law wanted him to drop this silly comic book shit and get into the
So I find all this balance between artist and craftsman and educator and doer, because that's another thing too. I just really I just think it's fascinating that I think he was writing it all down to teach himself. Mm-hmm. You know, I think we do that too, where I'm going to put this book together because I would like this book to exist. Because that's certainly what I think about when we're doing our work. Well, why am I going to do this? Well, because I would like this to exist, right? So how frustrating it must have been that there was nothing, not one class, not one book, nothing that taught what was in that book before that book existed. Just fascinating to me. So anyway, the other thing that haunts me from this thing, I carry it around with me and I can't even explain. There's two things actually, but the one that Matt Collins says about how his artwork got less
dark, but the subject matter got darker.
Much darker. It was absolutely fascinating. Yep. If he was alive today, that would be the first question asked. Were you aware? Was it conscious or not? Because sometimes not conscious at all. You look back 10 years ago, ooh, wow, what's going on here? But I personally have a great affinity for noir-looking artwork, high contrast art. It just, I have keratoconus, my eyes love it. You know, it just, I have a real appeal for it. And I did notice that as the subject matter got more mature, the artwork got more theatrical and less about.
I've seen him interviewed elsewhere, and I would say probably, as an older man, he probably understood the direction his narrative philosophy was taking.
For sure.
Becoming so much darker.
But I wonder if the artwork
But the
slowly
art,
turned into gray.
no, I don't think he quite realized it. I think he was
There's
just going to something that was
here-
more fluid for him, you know?
There's someone who actually knew him and worked with him who won't be on this panel. So let's
Trying to
ask her.
sneak out the door.
Is
She's
she
trying to sneak out the
really-
door.
Sneaking out the door.
Did she really just think
Sneaking out the goddamn door.
Diana was his editor for like 10 years. Come on. Unbelievable. I don't think she ever met him. I don't believe it. Yeah.
But I had seen him interviewed and heard him speak about how he had discovered this ink wash technique, and he described it as, it's just dirty water. I'm just using dirty water.
Wow.
And it's a really great effect. It's just dirty water.
See, but that's what I'm talking about. That's not true. And I know he knows that's not true.
Yeah.
So it's just fascinating that it's just dirty water. So funny.
There's one other thing that I was really curious about was his collaborative process. I mean, there's not many contexts in which Jules Feiffer and Lou Fine are both kind of footnotes.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people that he worked with. Like, it didn't all come just from him. And Feiffer was mostly writing the stories for a few years in there. I'd love to know how that worked and how they worked together.
Well, I just love how much ball busting. I mean, Jules Feiffer never opened his mouth without complimenting him and then busting his balls right away.
At the same time, yeah.
It's just absolutely fascinating. And I do like he took a little dig at him about the educational comics, but you see Will's reaction? He loves those comics. Like, he really, like it's all important to him. Like, you know, if it wasn't, he would have laughed it off. He couldn't laugh it off.
That goes into what you're saying about you're just doing it for yourself first. You know?
Yeah. No, as commercial as it was, he probably got more feedback on that stuff, like immediate positive feedback, than he ever got. Looked like it took decades for him to figure out the spirit meant a damn thing to anybody. But I think the educational stuff he heard right away. This worked for us.
I also liked Dennis's point, which I had never considered, about the fact that comics were like on the racks and kids went to buy them. The spirit came into the family home in the Sunday newspaper, and that's a completely different, that cracked down a huge wall and exposed it to people that would never deign to pick up a comic book.
Yeah, well, they talk about like the difference between how the public reacts to television actors than they do to movie actors, because the television people come into their home, so they feel closer. So when they see the actor, they actually like
feel chummy with
them.
him.
If you see Tom Cruise, like, oh my God, they don't come near him. But if you see like Frasier, they go, hi Frasier. They feel it's subconscious, like, oh, you're in my house. You see me in my underwear. You know. So
And that was a huge risk for him too. I mean, you're talking about that sort of superpower of being in the right place at the right time and knowing what to do. Thinking about, that was the height of the Eisner Iger, that workshop, that shop. They were really popular at the time, and he gave that up to make the spirit. And I mean, that's a huge risk, and yet look what happened. It's just amazing to me that he had that foresight, that
and
I don't think he says I had the bucket. I don't think that's true. Because there was like, if we've read I've read like many books. You've written a book about this. There were hundreds, if not 1,000 artists of merit in New York City at the same time, all doing work. He's the only one that, put it all together. So it's hard for me to buy this bucket analogy. It's very humble, I understand, but it was a major thing.
I kind of wonder why the spirit was the only thing that did what it did with the newspaper distribution. Like that, there was nothing like beforehand. There was nothing like after it. There was nothing while it was going on, and it still lasted 12 years.
Yeah, he's like when Friends came on. The next year, there were 7 shows like Friends.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If that's the way pop culture works, where was the spirit knockoffs? Yeah, that's fascinating. It is, and I think maybe they tried it, and
I don't know of one. I mean, was there another?
No, but I don't think we saw them. I think they tried it. So this isn't. So
the bar was so high.
Yeah, exactly.
I think someone sat down and drew one and went, ooh, So anyway,
Do you think that maybe the spirit could have, instead of creating knockoffs, just permeated the minds of the other artists that were the contemporaries of the time, and made his influence that way showing up? I in the pages of Batman or Superman or something.
Well, I think
it would be more in the genre comics they were talking about in the 50s, EC and
You could see it. You could see it in the stuff in the game stuff. You go to Wallywood, you can totally see it. Absolutely.
John Severin, Severin's work.
Yeah. So not into those Sunday Funny guys or the comic books. A lot of those guys were specifically trying to keep their head down and do the work, and not So breaking up the page like that. might get them called into the office, or they might just lose the gig to the 10 other people that are behind them looking for the gig, which is, you know, sometimes just the way people are. They're just like, I just want the work, you know, and also coming out of depression and there's a war going on, you know, I'm not going to, hey, I'm going to have guys floating in the air and you'll see what happens, you know. The other thing I want to talk about, and I wrote, you know, someone picked up that Fagin the Jew graphic novel, which is a much lesser known work by him, and I was actually unaware of it when Diana, is she back in the room? Did she? Okay. When Diana called me and asked me to write the intro for it, which I was very honored to do, but it was this great opportunity to read a Will Eisner book that I actually kind of didn't know existed, and I read it, and the book itself is about. You know, there's this horribly anti-Semitic caricature in Oliver Twist, and he tells the whole story of Oliver Twist from the point of view of this racist anti-Semitic character. I'm Jewish. I was fascinated by why he would do that, and it cuts right into this whole part of his life where he was doing. Racist cartoons, but not to be racist, but because it was part of the time. And he had to do a whole graphic novel using someone else's character from the point of view of that caricature to kind of work out, why did I do it? You know what I mean? Like, what was going, like, why? I'm a forward-thinking, progressive person. I'm like, in every other aspect of my life, I'm a couple steps ahead. Why was I so behind in this, you know, in what were thousands of drawings of this character? So I'm fascinated by it. I absolutely are. I just wanted to put the subject out there to talk about. We see it going on in comics right now where the way women are depicted is just, there's now a line that will not be crossed. Like, well, that's not funny or cute anymore. This is how we're going to represent. And I think I see a similar thing where, you know, some artists that 10 years ago would draw Vampirella licking a popsicle and giggle about it, wouldn't do it like oh, I shouldn't be doing that, you know. So, and you think 50 years ago that would happen, but it's just happening now. And so I find that part of his career and this little subset very fascinating to me. This it's okay to be racist about this because everybody was, you know. So anyway, I don't know what your thoughts are. And you're using the character.
I'm using Ebony.
Yeah, so let's talk about it. Yeah.
I decided to use Ebony because it's just such a significant part of the strip.
Will you be representing him visually the way he was represented?
No. We're going to draw him and portray him as a streetwise young black man of his day. Darwin Cook, when he revamped the Spirit for DC about 5 years ago, they updated the character. I thought that was kind of a valiant effort, but in the end, I don't think that's the way to go with these narratives. I'm kind of like, stick to the time period they were created in, and then when Frank Miller did his film, he just left Ebony out altogether. And I thought, well, Darwin, I thought, went too far the other direction. He made Ebony almost unrecognizable. He looked like he just stepped out of an Abercrombie and Fitch ad, you know. The other direction is just ignore that he existed whatsoever. So again, I'm trying to get my head around it, and I think I've got it to where I'm going to be happy with it.
Well, but I think you gain some insight that if he did it today, you can write what he would do with the character today. And I think he
exactly.
was already well. So that's just absolutely fascinating.
Yep.
Have you guys thought about this at all? This the art of the time, the characters of the time, and where we are now versus where we were then.
Let me just say in rereading a lot of that stuff, Ebony's not the only one.
Oh no!
Italians are a certain way in the old Spirit books. Jews are a certain way. Arabs are a certain way.
It's true.
Irish guys, they might as well be wearing Lucky Charms outfits. It's
no, but it's funny. But even like I'm Jewish, and even in the representation of Fagin in the book, I wasn't offended by it. There's kind of I won't say skillful, but there's something to it that it's not bothering me. Like caricatures, I was a character artist, you were a character artist. The character artist is just a caricature. That's not offensive, but there was something truly, where Ebony came from was a truly awful place. you know, and there's.
But
a
in
difference there,
his defense, and as he says,
Yeah.
he always portrays Ebony as a, you know, a moral character.
No, he totally does.
Yeah,
he truly does. But
he's
later,
not lazy and shiftless and not at all.
Totally,
you know, yeah.
totally. Any thoughts on this, or are we just babbling like loons about it?
No, I mean, I think it's interesting because in many ways things have changed quite a bit, and I think you're absolutely right. If he was writing it today, Ebony would, you know, would be a very different situation. But in some ways things haven't changed because we still, you know, there are still these stereotypes and things in comics and in the newspapers and things like that. So I do feel like, yeah, we've done so much, you know, we've had so much progress, and then sometimes I'll see an image or you know, and I think, wow, you know, we really have. You mentioned women too, you know.
No, women's the big one right now. Women's like the last frontier of, and it's just a bunch of guys alone in the room, and they're so horny, and they don't know what to do with themselves. Like, I get why it's taken so long. Like, this is the only female contact they have is their pen. So, but it is nice to be around for this, to be, you know what I mean, as my daughters grow to an age where by the time they're able to read it, then all that'll be gone, and that's great.
Yeah, and I will say that usually when it happens, there's an outcry, or people say, whoa, that was, you know, yikes. It certainly happens, but I do feel like there's more conversation. Instead of being like, oh, cool, you know, there's more of a conversation around it.
Yeah, totally. And not to be completely damning of all, like I work with Frank Cho every once in a while. He draws beautiful women, and I also point out he draws gorgeous guys too, and he draws super sexy monkeys. Like it is everything to him is this. Like this is where he is on everything. I didn't ask, there's been where I didn't even write the word monkey, and all of a sudden the monkey comes up looking all like, what's going on here?
It's funny you pointed out because I've had people, you know, non-comic readers, civilians I like to call them, say to me, you know, what's up with all the women and big tits in comics, you know? And I said, have you seen the guys in comics?
Yeah, yeah.
And
I bring
look
it
like
up.
that, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's an idealized form. It's an exaggerated form, you know?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
And like some artists just draw everything beautiful, like Dave Stevens. Everyone was gorgeous.
Yep.
Like that's just everyone got equal treatment.
And then some of them are just pandering.
Yeah, and
there's
I'm
something
talking about the
floating on that woman's chest.
Yeah,
what's wrong there?
The pandering nonsense from someone who clearly has never met someone
right.
of the opposite sex. That stuff is going away, and I'm thrilled. Beautiful illustration, that's fine. Totally, you know.
But yeah, the Ebony stuff takes you right out of it. It makes it really hard to read.
It does.
There's that Best of the Spirit collection DC published about 10 years ago, and those are all stories that don't have him in them at all. That makes it much easier to read that way. And then you just start getting to the other stuff, and just every third page you're like,
uh-oh.
Context
Yeah.
of its time.
Yeah. No, but it was, I think this movie and then reading Fagin, I got to heal that part for myself, because it was like, why is this genius, what was this one little thing that seemed off, and I'm glad there was this, to have context, and the context to be what I wanted, which was an explanation I can wrap my head around, of course, you know, so. But to the earlier question, Diana, did you ever talk to Will about the change in his art style that went from the earlier days to, as his work got more adult, the art got more theatrical and less contrasty and noirish?
Not really, but I can say this about his later stuff. He stopped using, you know, flat blacks for shading, and he went to a more painterly gray wash. And he was very proud of his gray wash because it was just the
Dirty water.
dirty ink. He was a kid of the Depression, so of course he still carried that with him.
I got this bottle of ink I made it last 5 years.
Yeah. It's like the Hanukkah miracle.
That and every single Xerox that he ever made, he made sure he used the other side of the paper as well.
I remember seeing him give a speech one time, and he was talking about when he worked at when he had his production guy when they was producing The Spirit. You know, they would produce these plates like he was talking about, the printing plates. His production manager would use the originals as liner between, and his attitude was like, this stuff's worthless, I got stats, I don't need these anymore.
That hurts to hear.
Yep.
It really does. It really hurts. Well, because we've all had like, you get your art back from the printer and the coffee cup stain is like, they just put the coffee right on your artwork because they see it as useless and, you know, they print it already. We can just use it as a coaster. Well, so you've met Will in your life.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was. You were talking there about him being an inspiration. I got a really great story about that. I was lucky enough to be a presenter at the first Eisners.
The first ever?
The first ever. And so to lead off the ceremonies, he got up and gave this introductory speech, and he just, you know, as you can tell from hearing him speak, he's very motivating and motivated. And he talked about how much he believed in this art form, as you said, the vast capacity it has to reach and inspire and move and educate, and if by lending his name to this procession and these awards, it helped further this art form, he was only too proud and too honored. I mean, not a dry eye in the house at the end of this, right? We're all just like, oh God. And so then the awards go on. I was up for a couple of awards too that I didn't win. And then afterwards we had a little photo sesh.
Who'd you lose to?
I can't remember.
Liar.
But no, I really can't. Then we had a little photo sesh up on because it was the very first Eisner Awards, and so then my wife and I go back to the hotel, and we just happened to get on the elevator same time as Will and Ann, and so he recognizes me from being on stage, and he goes, "Oh, congratulations," and I was like, "I didn't win anything, Will," and he leans over and gives me this grandfatherly squeeze and a wink, and he goes, "Yes, you did." I about broke in the fucking tears, man.
That's fantastic.
It took everything I had to go, thanks.
Too bad no one was there to see it. Anyway, no, it's
Plus, we were all on, a number of years ago, the Comic Legal Defense Fund did this fundraising cruise, which was, they had a whole bunch of...
I remember this,
They had a whole bunch of creators, and then you, as fans, could purchase a ticket on this cruise. Then there were workshops on the cruise and everything, and you know, I will say a lot of us professionals were a little worried about being trapped on a boat with a bunch of fans for a week. It was not a problem at all. Everybody was cool.
That's cool.
But the best part was, you know, we would generally take over like one bar. These cruise ships are just floating cities practically, so we could have this one bar that was like our gathering spot every night. Will was up with us youngsters every night till 11:30 or 12.
Is that true?
Know. Yep.
Wow.
Chatting and, you know, giving that same inspirational punch on the shoulder and... Huh? What? And flirting, a little flirting. Yeah, I think a little flirting.
Shocking.
Anne had gone to bed by that point. So,
Well, that's
so yeah, he was just wonderful in real life too.
And you, Douglas, have you ever meet him?
Met him very briefly. I was lucky enough to judge the Eisner Awards one year, and the thing that got me to agree to that was like, oh, and you get to meet Will. Okay. Yeah, I'll do that.
It's cool.
That's cool. And it was a good experience.
It was a 30-second long experience, but it was a great 30-second long experience.
And Susan?
No, I never was able to meet him. But I will say, judging the Eisner Awards is, I feel like a part of something.
Yeah.
And I think that Douglas visited my class and talked about how it is really a golden age of comics, and I think he would be very happy because right
Absolutely.
now I'm getting these boxes of everything that was published in the past year, and it's just absolutely amazing, the diversity, because I said, you know, he always believed in the form, and there's great stuff for kids. There's from every age and all different topics. You know, there's stuff about you know, Ernest Shackleton, these nonfiction things. There's these things about climate change, great international stuff, great manga.
And from every type of creator.
Every type of creator. There's mainstream stuff. There's, you know, just somebody in their garage. I mean, it's just such a wealth and diversity of material, and I think. Obviously, I did not know him, but I think he would be very pleased with the boxes that are on my doorstep. So, and I did tell when I was lucky enough to go to the Eisner Awards, I said to them, if there is anything I can do to be a part of this, to help with his legacy, I will do it.
You were talking there about him addressing his. In Fagin, you know, why did I do this in an earlier stage of my life? You saw that reflected too in the moment when he meets the hippie crowd. Mm-hmm. You know, these potheads who at first, you know, when he first looks at those undergrounds, he's like, ooh. And then he talks about on the way home, he readdressed that in his own mind and came around to, there's something going on here I don't quite understand. But
Yeah,
that's what young people are for, you know.
Yeah, because originally when I saw this the first time, I thought, oh, he didn't get but it takes a minute. He said he didn't just blah, and a lot of people do. They just blah,
Yep,
blah,
yep.
I'm done with that.
Yep.
That was disgusting. But instead he was thoughtful and literally got home and changed his life because of it.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that's
indeed,
fascinating.
indeed, yep.
Now, and you've won since, right? Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to. I was being silly about the other thing, but so we've all had that great experience, and I know that there are people in the audience. In fact, I know because my students are here that you imagine one day could I win? Like when you're young creator, like could I win an Eisner? Oh my God, what that must be. A thing, right? And on our year, when me and Mike won for Powers, it was the only time we never been there before. Like I didn't know what the situation was. And when we got there, a few months before, a peer of ours had did an interview where he said that he won his Eisner and then couldn't draw for a year because it paralyzed him because he realized everyone was judging him.
It's the opposite for me.
I know, and I was like, oh, why? And I was literally because I didn't understand what was going on. I just that when we got nominated, I said, well, if we win, I'm going to get up there and just start yelling, stop judging me, and just be a jerk about it. And then I didn't know you got up there, and as you guys saw on the tape, Will Eisner hands you the award and gives you a hearty handshake, and I had a very similar moment where. He looks at you like he didn't know what I was doing, but if you got up to the stage, he looks at you like, good for you getting up on this stage.
Yeah.
Like, you must have done something worth a damn.
And you're the legacy I dreamed about.
Yeah, no,
someday.
he legitimately is happy to hand you the award. There's a moment, and I remember he touched me. Like I didn't know any of this was going to happen. I just thought you get up there, get a bowling trophy, and sit down. And Will Eisner shakes your hand, and whatever asshole thing I was about to do. right out of my like a superpower just shot it right out of me. But it was. I tell people that look and handshake is better than the award, and I feel it's too bad that he's not around anymore because that was amazing. Like I guess also we didn't know it was going to happen, but it was a really powerful experience. So I was glad to have it. I also have that that regret that I carry with me every day of my life. Diana. We were at San Diego. Come to lunch with me and Will, and I said no, because I was like embarrassed. I was like shy. I'm not a shy person, but I was like, oh no, I can't do that. And then he passed soon after, but a couple years ago, Stan Lee emailed me out of the blue and goes, let me take you to lunch. I went, yes, absolutely, because I still to this day I'm like, oh my God, how could I have turned that? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I know you looked at me like, are you out of your mind? So anyway.
He, when I'm at any sort of signing, you're the same. But you get shown a lot of work by wannabes, up and comings, people that are looking for their
different
break.
Variables of success. Yeah.
Oh, by far, huge variables of success. And I remember I was somewhere, and this one kid came up to me, and he said, and he wasn't a kid, he was teen or young 20s. And he said, well, are you looking at portfolios? Are you looking at work? Will you look at my work? And generally, I'm real accepting of that. And I was on the verge of saying yes. He goes, I have a note here from Will Eisner. And I was like, what? And I opened it up, and it was just this, dear Matt, the kid was in his class at SUV.
Really?
Dear Matt, please take a look at Eric's, whatever his name was, stuff. He's one of my most enthusiastic students. And it wasn't just he ran on for several lines, and...
it's like getting a note like Jimmy Hoffa had, give this person all due consideration.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I when I was in college.
The kid needed more work, but...
No, but you didn't take it much more seriously.
But I guess the point I'm making there is that it wasn't that I needed to take it more seriously. The fact that Will wrote such an encouraging thing for him, he was going to take himself more seriously, Yeah. And that's the skill that any good teacher can bring to their students.
When I was in college, I sent Will Eisner one of my first things, and it sucked. It was terrible. And I was just in the middle of finding out a lot of stuff, and I sent it to him. He wrote back. Mm-hmm. He wrote back and literally said, stop the pyrotechnic stuff. And it was, I was over Zipitoning. Remember Zipitone?
Yeah.
See, before computers, there was they had stickers. You could put them all over your artwork and make it look like, you know. And I was Zipitoning the hell out of everything to try to emulate a Guy Davis and just overwork it to cover up what I thought were probably inferior drawings. So I was covering it up, and he immediately saw right through it and said, "Yeah, don't do that. You're clobbing up the story." Never did it.
Yeah.
And I, you know, he wrote back. He did. It was a couple sentences, but more than I deserved, to be honest with you. If you'd have seen the work, you'd been like, you know. So anyway, it was a very special thing. Well, let's. If you guys have any questions for the panelists, we don't want to. We can, you know, commiserate all day. But any thoughts or feelings about the movie that you saw, particularly the students in the writing class who are getting a freebie today? Oh, I love the awkwardness of the no questions. Yes, it's my favorite thing.
Well, was there any perception that comics had moved past kids? They explained that the GIs had all been making comics while they were overseas and they came back and now they wanted more mature stuff. Was that something that publishers and just people in general could only understand in hindsight?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, maybe not so the publishers, but generally I mean, look at, you know, the Wortham and his attack on the industry, you know, that was all the fact that comics could only be for kids. It could only be perceived by kids and therefore perceived wrongly, you know.
And would damage the kids,
Yeah.
because that was, at the time.
There's another documentary that I wanted to get to this semester, but I don't think we're going to be able to, called Comic Book Confidential. And it's equally good. It's a little cheesy with the
rating parts.
But it covers a lot of ground, particularly in the alternative comics scene. And that little clip you saw of William Gaines,
there's a lot more.
There's a lot more of his testimony, and it's all fantastic and, in my opinion, massively historically important. So if we don't get to it in the class, they just re-released it on Blu-ray this year, and it's definitely worth a shot. So
there were, you know, following up on that comment, like in the post-war years, late 40s, early 50s, there's a huge amount of social engineering, and it wasn't just in the publishing industry. If you read, say, Hunter Thompson's Hell's Angels, that was a group that didn't fit into this new, really socially engineered
nuclear family,
just trying to sweep everything under the rug. It was a bunch of flyboys who came back from the war, had a lot of PTSD, and you know, sort of wouldn't go to the suburbs, wouldn't go to Levittown. You know, you read about Disney's days post-war, where these guys had nothing to lose, and they were sleeping in the studio, cooking on hibachis. You know, that was when the union stuff was happening. You know, there was a whole bunch of stuff that people were trying to sort of tamp down in that era.
Well, it was war fever. You know, you can't thrust all these people. You can't draft a whole young population, thrust them into the pit of war, and expect them to come home and be calm about it. You know, I mean, their blood's still gonna be up. They're still gonna base everything based around the high tension experiences they've had over the last several years. You know, and they're gonna want you see that in the EC comics. You know, the certain bloodthirsty story was appealing to that. What they were missing now, sitting at home with the wife and 2 kids, you know.
And also just this, you know, the culture always lends itself to be vanilla. There's always like to try to make everything, you know, there's always trying to make everything happy, like let's sell happiness, right? And that's not the whole range of human emotions. So the other half finds a way, and I had to be all Jurassic Park, but it finds a way, you know, you know, like it comes out somehow, whether it be this or weird horror movies or just like, you know, and it's that nice middle, you know, the basic cable TV shows. It's a nice, you know, but it's always funny. I was fascinated, like when the culture tries so hard to repress certain emotions, it always slingshots back more violently.
Yeah. I was just going to say, it's interesting how, you know, in many ways Eisner sort of bypassed that moment, because in 1952 he ended the Spirit and founded his company. So he sort of was able to bypass that moment, you know, the comics code.
Oh, you mean,
you know, because he wasn't doing comics.
Right.
He had his company.
He didn't have a target on his back.
Exactly. Well, I mean, he was doing the educational, what was the magazine? The
PS.
Yes, he was doing that, but he wasn't really doing the Spirit anymore. So he sort of was able to circumvent that kind of moment.
Yeah, and that stuff's been collected too, by the way. All the Army stuff and everything, educational. No, but you can actually buy it. It's actually been published, and it's it's really good. It really is. It's not the groundbreaking spirit, but it's valid work by a great artist. So, and someone had a question for you.
So back to when Will Eisner had that moment on the train. That moment that you could go, I
think he was a little stoned.
Right, yeah.
The contact high was
was enough.
Try out these guys. Very, very simple work. I'll think about it. But no, I was curious because the part for me in writing that this doesn't put the same thing for everyone, but that I grow the most is when I'm struggling with something, but or trying to learn something new from outside myself. And I was just wondering, did you guys ever have a moment like that when you went to a comic convention and you saw a group or comic or had this same moment?
I've been part of it. When me and my friends were coming up in the middle of the '90s, all the caliber guys that were not independent enough to be independent, not mainstream enough to be mainstream, but we're all genre guys. And it's very much what Image is right now, where it's everyone's got a strong genre take, and because Fantagraphics wouldn't have us and Marvel wouldn't have us, we kind of just all held each other and moved forward. All of which became without anybody left behind, everyone became mainstream successful eventually, which was fascinating. But I felt even then this is a good group. These are no matter if we ever find success or not, we're all going to do it forever. We're all lifers, we're all in, and we're all by the nature, and we all came from different parts of the world and all had different upbringings. One of my best friends is David Mack, who grew up in Bromley, Kentucky, which does sound like the place that Larry Flint was making moonshine, because it was. And I'm the first Jewish person he had ever met, and we became best friends, you do when you're 8 years old and you walk up to someone and go, let's be best friends, okay, and just walk off. That's literally what happened. That happened to us at a comic convention. I was telling someone here how he took one of my pages away from me and showed me my line. I was over inking, and he just took it away. He goes, no, dude, like that. And it was 20 years old, and but I immediately found this group of like-minded people with the same goals in life that were pure from all walks of life that I'd never had, even though I had friends, but I had not friends that shared this very important part of my life. And we all came through and are still, in our 40s now, all making comics together. And so I've experienced it from the inside. I haven't gone to a show and went, what are these crazy kids doing with their Syntac tablets? If anything, I find it to be a very open, you can literally, if you're a professional, you can walk up to just about anybody and say hi, and you're having a real moment.
Not only as a professional, this is one of the things I like about comics and comic book cons. You can have access to your favorite creators.
Yeah.
You couldn't walk up and meet Stanley Kubrick. You couldn't walk up and meet Eddie Van Halen or Dre.
Well, Eddie Van Halen, you might have been able to.
Maybe,
but,
you found the right
where you
bar,
are, yeah,
but,
exactly.
you get what I'm saying. Whereas comic books, it's so immediate.
Up until Twitter, the only medium that had this kind of access was country music. Country music would have a convention where you can literally meet the biggest stars in the world, and comics had that too. But now Twitter, you can yell at anybody you're a fan of. But yeah.
The inverse of that caliber moment you're talking about, they talk about this a little bit in the movie. They were all from New York, but there's a lot of early creators who were specifically from the Bronx and who specifically went to one particular high school and had art classes with one particular art teacher. And I'm not remembering the name of the school.
DeWitt.
DeWitt. Okay, you know better than I do. But you get the sense that there's this kind of genius going.
Who's this?
There was Bob Kane, and
he mentioned that he knew
Kirby.
They went to high school together, and he said he couldn't stand it, but they used to go on double dates together. I think that's the story. But anyway, so
guys will do what they got to do.
There was a whole group of people. I can't remember all the names.
But you reminded me. One of the most exciting things when I first saw this movie was when you. Shop Talk is a book of transcripts of these interviews that he did, and hey, guess what? The first comics podcast was Will Eisner's, and because that's what it is, and so he invented that too, and and when I heard the tapes for the first, like I read the book like it was the Bible, and when I heard the, oh my God, the tapes, I was like, oh my, they're real, like they got the tapes. I was so excited. But it's truthfully a fascinating thing that he would interview all of these creators, literally just to try to figure it out. Like, how is it us? Like, why is it us? And like that conversation with Jack Kirby is very unique because these two, I mean, these are the titans, right? And literally all they're talking about is, okay, let's figure out how did we get here together, holding hands. Did something explode?
No, it's fine.
Okay, all right. So if you get a chance, Shop Talk is really good. But it's what it's about. It's that almost like a midlife crisis thing. Like how did I get here?
And to further answer your question there, I mean, you'll fess up to this too. What you're talking about there, those moments, they happen all the time.
Yeah.
When, again, we're at cons a lot, and we interact with our colleagues a lot, who, as Brian says, generally our profession is sitting alone in your basement or at your drawing table. It's a very kind of solitary and stationary sort of thing. Cons are our only chance to intermingle with our colleagues, and we take great advantage of it. And I always come back from a con feeling invigorated by
Aren't you also
hanging,
surprised no one's ever been murdered? Just it's so
that we know about.
Yeah, exactly. It's so like a bunch of socially inept. I mean, anyone got really good at their gig, it's because they spent a lot of time alone in the room. And that's just not artists and writers, but in musicians, like you spend a lot of time alone, and then all of a sudden you're like on stage. I'm surprised that there literally hasn't been like a riot or like someone has said something like insane. So
I think you're thinking the early Image days.
maybe close. That was close as it got.
But to follow up on that,
Yeah,
I had specifically an occurrence in my younger days, and this goes into what you're talking about, the craft of everything. I went to a college in Northern Virginia for 2 years, and I was an art major, and the classes were okay, but the best education I had while I was there was I worked for the college newspaper. This came out twice a week, had a pretty big circulation, 25,000 copies or so. They would go to press twice a week, and then the next day you'd walk around campus and there were just stacks of these things everywhere. They were free for the students. And so I did a comic strip for them twice a week. But then I was also their graphic artist, and then they later upped that to editor, which is this fancy way of saying I was their spot illustrator, which meant every night they went to press, which was Wednesday and Sunday, I had to show up at the offices around 9 o'clock at night. They already had the paper laid out at that point. Whatever they didn't have an ad or copy or photo for, any blank spot, I had to fill in with a spot illustration. And I couldn't leave till all that shit was done. It usually took me till 2 or 3 in the morning every time. For that, I got a 1 credit A and $35 a month, and I thought I was on top of the world.
Yeah, sounds fantastic. Though.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the best part is for the first time in my life, I was not drawing because I wanted to. I was drawing because I had to. Right. And that taught me, like, no, shit's due. You stay there and you work at it. It doesn't, and sometimes every comic artist will tell you this. Sometimes there's something that's not right in panel 2. Well, that's just tough. You got to move on to panel 3 because panel 2, you've spent as long on as you can.
Done is beautiful.
Yep.
The only thing I will say is that when you do go to the shows now and you see like a younger generation or indie artist who's got some, I'm always envious of anyone's great idea when you go, that's a great idea. Or my worldview, I would have never seen it that way. I'm so excited to even just buy it,
Yep.
But when I see like people hanging on the artist alley, because me and my friends would sit in that artist alley with a warm blanket of indifference, like nobody gave a shit we were there, and we'd just sit there like all day, every day, and you'd have like 2 or 3 interactions with some people that it didn't go anywhere, but all that kind of made us who we were and bonded our friendships forever. And when I see that happening to other people, I go, because you can only do that once in your life, but
Which, and obviously Will felt that for the people he saw coming up behind him as well. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't get freaked out when I see anything. I don't get insulted by anything. So I don't look at people's artwork and go, oh, hey, kids today with the thing and the stuff. I don't do that, but I do. I get excited because we literally have gone to shows with no way to get home. Like, if I don't sell these 4 graphic novels, we don't have money for gas and we're not getting home. And when you think about it now, I go, that's insane. But we literally did this for years, well into my 20s. Sounds like something you do when you're like 19. I was like 28. And I was like, I don't know how I'm getting home from San Diego. And I always get home, but when you think back, you go, So that stuff, I envy it because I know what a great feeling it is and how character building it is. And I'm thrilled that I did it. And I hope, and I do, I go, oh, I hope they get to have that. Like, I hope you meet like 4 people here that become like your best friends forever, so.
My first check I got for, it was the first summer I didn't go home to stay with my parents. I stayed in Philadelphia for the summer, which was where I was going to art school at that point. And it was for the first issue of Grendel. So to write, pencil, and ink, 30 pages, I got $1,000. And I thought, I am set for the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Any more questions before we... Yes, Diana. What was Will Eisner like?
In fact, I'd like to tell a story about that. In the year 2000, he was a guest of honor at the Small Press Expo in Bethesda, Maryland. And this is a convention very much like our homegrown Stumptown show used to be, with young up-and-comers sort of showing their mini comics and whatnot. And Will spent the Saturday of the show, he agreed to let me take him around from table to table and introduce him to all these, 20-year-old kids who were working on their mini comics. And these were people like Paul Hornschmeyer, Anders Nilsson, sort of the Fantagraphics, Ron Quarterly, Matt Madden, Jessica Abel, and of course, everyone was sort of struck dumb by the great master coming around, and he was sincerely interested in their work, to the point that night, he was leaving the next day, that night he said to me, I can't wait to he was 82 at this point. I can't wait to get back home to the drawing board because I'm so jazzed by what I see.
That's amazing.
He might have filled that bucket with rainwater, but he put it in a watering can.
I feel we should end on that, right?
Yeah.
I have a question for Susan.
Oh, yes.
Which has to do with what we discovered in class reading Contract with God, and the, maybe you could speak to the idea of theory and how little there is about Will.
Well, Contract with God is one of my evergreen titles in terms of teaching. I always want to teach something by Will Eisner. I feel in a comics class I want to, I always want to teach something by Will Eisner, and I have found that Contract with God really resonates with people. You're talking about the agony, the emotion, and things like that. So I often, almost always try and teach Contract with God. And it's a theory class, so we're reading the theory around these, key works in the field. And at this point, there's very little written about Will Eisner. And there are some articles written about him from a scholarly perspective. They primarily focus on his themes of Jewish identity and things like that, and I think that clearly was incredibly important. But I also, as a scholar, feel frustrated. There isn't more work that has been done on him. And it's pretty easy for any of you to do a search in one of the scholarly databases, and you pull up certain artists, and Spiegelman is one who there's a lot has been written about him, and understandably and justifiably so. But Eisner remains, in my opinion, criminally under-examined.
And do you have any speculations as to why that is?
Why, I think that, and it's really conjecture, but I feel like in some ways Contract with God, it was 1978, and in some ways it slipped under the radar. I just was looking at some statistics today, actually, about Contract with God, and I guess in that same year, Will Eisner put out a golf calendar and a tennis calendar, and they both outsold.
No shit.
Contract with God. Not now, but that was like as of 1980, and his golf and tennis calendars had outsold a contract with God. So I do feel like in some ways it's kind of, and again, I'm sure that it's outsold those things by now, but at the time, it didn't really, I think it got in the hands of the right
I think the
people.
golf calendar may have lost its
Yes, I don't, exactly. No, but I'm
expiration
saying,
date on the calendar.
Yeah, well, and obviously.
Every 7 years.
Yeah, exactly. But I think at the time it was, it got into the right hands and it was reprinted and so forth. But in some ways it slipped under the radar. And I don't, honestly, I feel like it's a failing of scholars in that he's a key figure both for the educational work that he's done, the pedagogical work that he's done, as well as just, the spirit and all of these amazing things.
So what are you going to do about that?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. If only there was someone we knew.
Yeah, let's read books about God.
So,
well, I wonder,
yeah.
my one theory would be, is that he kind of wrote the books on Will Eisner. Like, he wrote a bunch of textbooks that are also very, just filled of anecdotes and stuff, and that he kind of wrote the book himself. So you're gonna, and so the daunting task that's now before you for next year Christmas time is to put a book out that shows us things that he didn't show himself. I think that's why we all love this movie so much, because I'm like, it's a little bit of all these things I really wanted to know. I don't think I knew that about Contract with God and how personal it was, and how devastating it'd be for someone who grew up, suppressing emotions. To what would he have done without the outlet?
There's also the attitude of the creator himself. I'm sure he would have a kind of aw shucks sort of attitude towards somebody approaching him like that. Whereas, Spiegelman just. Please analyze me.
Well, and that was the popular press too. Spiegelman, that was won the Pulitzer, and there was a lot of hoopla about it. But I do think there's so much more work to be done on Eisner and in comic studies in general.
I'm excited to read your book. I'm not joking, by the way. Don't you? You've done this already on other creators, so.
Well,
doesn't it seem like it's your? I'm putting you right on the spot.
I'll get right on that.
Just make the greatest thing ever and get back to us. Anyway. Anything else before we wrap it up? Diana, no?
I want to add one more thing.
Please do.
The thing we were talking about at the beginning. As I'm working here on the Spirit, I've been in close contact with Dennis Kitchen, who we saw speaking so much there, and using him as a research resource, and he's just been wonderful. I'll say to him, Dennis, can you send me all the appearances of the octopus? And brrr, a list shows up,
That's amazing.
And he emailed me back and he said, by the way, do you know the origin of the name Piguel, the Spirit's #1 femme fatale? It is for Quartier Piguel, which is the red light district in Paris. And isn't that fucking great?
I like Sans Serif better, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's a great name too.
Sans
Well,
Serif.
I thank everyone for joining us here today. I think the best way we can celebrate Will Eisner here in Will Eisner Week is to spend the weekend, if not the week, reading some graphic novels and creating some graphic novels. I'm looking at my students who are working on their final. That is what he would want, I think, beyond anything, is for us to celebrate the form more than the man. So when you leave here this weekend, dive in head first. Try something you've not tried before. That's what he did, right?
Yes,
Try
indeed.
something you haven't tried before. Read something that is something you haven't read before, and give it a shot. And thank you all for spending your afternoon with us to celebrate this man that meant so much to us. Thank you to Diana for putting this together. And thank you to the entire panel, and thank you to Susan, who moved heaven and earth to get us this room and everything. So thank you very much, and have a lovely, lovely weekend.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.